Welcome to Please Me, the podcast bringing you bold conversations and big clit energy. Sí, Please Me ahora tiene subtítulos en español. And welcome to my Friday bonus episode series. I'm Eve, your host, on a journey from trauma to sexual liberation. Let's reclaim pleasure and close the orgasm gap, one empowering conversation at a time. On Wednesday, I began a powerful conversation about sexual assault and violence. Today, we continue with Shawn and Amanda to dive deeper into the tactics abusers use to isolate and control their victims. If you know someone who needs support, please share this episode and the resources linked in the show notes. Did you know that podcasts rely on listener support to keep bringing you the content you love? For the best way to support the show, join me on Patreon for ad-free listening, early releases, bonus episodes, and exclusive content. See show notes for the link. Got a burning question or want a free 10-minute consultation with me? Download the Owl app and give me a call. Check the show notes for my code to get $10 toward your first chat. Please Me is for mature audiences. Sit back, relax, and surrender to the pleasure of Please Me.
Not everyone's going to experience everything on this wheel in their relationship, right? Now, you might. And if you are, I'm very sorry that you experienced every one of these, because there are a lot of them on the wheel, but not all abusive relationships end up physically abusive. But all of them are going to be emotionally or socially abusive. And just because your abusive relationship doesn't have physical abuse does not mean you don't need as much help as somebody who is being physically abused in their relationship.
ASN Lifestyle Magazine is your go-to source for sex-positive, sophisticated content covering everything from the swinger lifestyle and adult entertainment to intimacy, wellness, and more. You can read every digital issue for free, and subscribers get access to exclusive content. See the show notes for the link to subscribe and check out their Instagram. I'm excited to share that I now have a monthly column in ASN called Big Clit Energy, a Please Me series. Don't miss it and subscribe today.
Okay. So really looking at the relationship and seeing how would be the safest way to get out and having help and support. And you just brought up something that I actually wanted to go into, which was the wheel that you talked about, right? Of the tactics that, I don't know the name of it, but the tactics that like an abuser would use to manipulate the victim. Can you just go through some of those, just name them out? Because I'm just curious to know what those are. And I think that this is so important for people to understand too.
Yeah. So we call it the power and control wheel.
Okay,
And
the power and control wheel.
yep, it's basically a wheel. There's little spokes coming off of the center, and each section of the spoke is different tactics that people might use. Now, we love and we hate the power and control wheel because if somebody has not recognized that they are in a violent relationship, they might look at that wheel and say, oh, I don't have that piece, so it must not be me. But the thing about it is that all of those different pieces can represent different parts of power and control. So you don't have to have all of them. No two relationships are going to look exactly the same. So you want to just start going back and forth, Shawn, about different spokes?
Yeah, I was pulling up the power and control wheel just to have it on there to actually just read all of them. It's like I can rattle off all of them, but I want to make sure I'm using the correct, like the terms that their wheel's using.
Okay.
I'll save my favorite one to talk about for the end, Amanda.
Okay.
Do you remember which one that one is?
No, I don't.
It's using privilege, so we'll get there.
Oh, all right.
But so on the wheel, like we have using economic abuse. So making it so that person either doesn't get a job, can't maintain their job, harming their education so they can't better their life, having a house but only having the abuser's name on the house, or a bank account but only the abuser's name is on the account, or abuser's name is on the account. So really making it so that they have no financial stability should they leave that relationship, because they understand if their partner can't support themselves, it makes it that much more difficult to leave, because really what are they going to do without a house, a car, and no job or money?
Okay, so that's one spoke.
All right. So another spoke is using coercion and threats, which, I mean, we've been talking about most of this time, right? So making or carrying out those threats, threatening to harm somebody, threatening to harm yourself if they leave, doing things so that they will drop charges if they did ever press charges against you, making somebody do something illegal so that you can't talk about what happened because you were doing something illegal at the time too. So usually we see that with drugs or in younger relationships, drinking alcohol, stuff like that. So that's another spoke.
Okay.
Then using intimidation, so making them afraid by using looks or gestures. And the way I explain this to people all the time in presentations is how many of you have the parent, grandparent, teacher, or coach who just could shoot you a look and you knew as soon as they did, you had to stop whatever you were doing. Pretty much
Absolutely.
everybody has experienced at least some point, right? The difference there is like our parents, grandparents is like those mentor figures and like guardian figures. They're using those looks to like say, hey man, you're doing something that you probably shouldn't be doing right now because you're going to get yourself hurt or make yourself look dumb. So maybe don't do that. An abusive person uses that same tactic, but the message behind what they're doing is you need to stop doing what you're doing because I don't like that, or I don't want you doing that, so you need to quit. They might break some of their property. They may abuse pets. They may display or threaten to use weapons, kind of those things to make them really feel like they don't have an option. So I can't leave or I can't do this because I know they don't like when I do it.
Okay. Intimidation.
Okay. So we also have using emotional abuse, which is just another very common thing that's used. So putting somebody down, making them feel bad about themselves. There's a lot of maybe like name calling and gaslighting going on in this stuff, making somebody think that they're quote unquote crazy, or making other people think that as well. Because if I can put somebody in that light of, look at, they're just making stuff up, then nobody's going to believe them. Nobody's going to take their side. Humiliation, just that basic like breaking down someone's self-esteem, because then they're easier to manipulate.
Okay.
Then I'm going to jump over one to go to minimizing, denying, and blaming, since it's a good connecting piece from the previous one.
Okay.
Because this is where they're going to make light of the abuse or say things like, oh, it didn't happen that way, or they're just crazy or blowing it out of proportion, saying that they actually, the victim is the cause of abuse. If you wouldn't have done this, I wouldn't have had to hit you. So trying to take blame off of themselves and make their victim feel like it was their fault. And really doing a lot of these things because it gives them some control over what their partner is and isn't doing. Because if I feel like I'm going to get abused because I'm doing X, Y, or Z, I may eventually change those behaviors to stop the abuse from happening. Or I might get to a point, if what my partner is saying that I'm experiencing just really isn't that bad, I might eventually believe that. And if I believe what I'm experiencing just isn't that bad, I'm probably not reporting it in the first place.
Okay.
All right. So this one, the next one is using children. Now, obviously, not all relationships have children involved in them, but the ones that do, people use children as pawns a lot in these kinds of relationships. So you might be trying to make the other person feel guilty about, oh, our child needs two parents, our child needs a home that we're together in. Sometimes people use children to relay messages back and forth, and that can get really sticky too, because we're saying maybe unpleasant things about the other parent and we're saying it to a child who's now impressionable about it. Using visitation times or like handoff times as an opportunity to harass somebody and to maintain that contact with them, right? If you have shared custody, if you have weekend visits or whatever. And having children in the first place is a really big potential way that somebody can maintain that power and control, right? Because if you have a child with somebody, you are always going to be connected to them in some way. So having that child kind of lets somebody sink their claws in, for lack of a better term, to another person.
Okay.
And then
Is this
before Amanda gets to the last one, there's two more spokes. There's two more. There's
okay?
8 total.
Okay.
So using privilege is the one that I always like talking about the most, because my biggest qualm with the power and control wheel is it says using male privilege. And the only reason that's my qualm with it is if I'm a man who's experiencing abuse in a relationship and I see using male privilege on this tool, I'm not going to identify with this tool now, right? Because I'm clearly not coming from a place of privilege while I'm the one experiencing the abuse. So
It could be
The
another
human,
man, though, that's experienced or dominating or abusing you. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a woman. It could be a man too.
but
Yeah.
it's just if I'm in a heterosexual relationship, this tool doesn't work with me, or it may
Right.
not work because I'm seeing
Right.
that in
Maybe that
privileged
should
people.
be in like parentheses, right? Because it could be using privilege or, but a man is typically in a more powerful
Oh yeah,
position in our patriarchal society. So given the society that we live in, I can understand why this wheel was developed in this way, but certainly it can be looked at in a different way. So you can go ahead and explain that.
yeah. That's why I like the human trafficking power and control wheel, because abusive people use the same tactics. So that wheel looks almost identical to the domestic violence power and control wheel. It just says using privilege, not using male privilege on it.
Gotcha.
Um,
Gotcha.
and the main reason I like to have that discussion with privilege is to reshape or reframe how we often view privilege when it comes to then relationship abuse. Because, like we talked about earlier, people's identities play a role in their potential risk and give them potential additional barriers to disclosing abuse or additional ways in which an abusive person can abuse them. Amanda pointed out earlier, as a guy, if I'm being abused by a woman, I might not admit it because that means I have to admit I was in a position where somebody was stronger than me or had more power than I did. And for a man in our society, that can be really difficult to do. So I'm not going to report it then based on that identity. But again, going back to that example of me being gay, because my partner could threaten to out me in that moment, that gives them a piece there. So reshaping how we view privilege to view it in relationships more on how do their identities interact and what barriers does that then give them to disclosing abuse, or what additional abuse tactics does that open them up to, versus seeing it as, well, it's a guy, so he inherently in our patriarchal society has more privilege, which men do. But in the confines of a relationship, that gender stereotype of men believing they have to be the strong, stoic ones can open them up to not wanting to talk about the abuse they're experiencing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then you said there was two more?
One more.
One more. One more.
One more.
Okay.
Yep. One more. And that's something we talked quite a lot about too. And that's using isolation. The isolation, the jealousy, go back to the whole beginning of our conversation. And
Exactly.
you hear a lot of that stuff. So we don't need to go deep into it, but that's
Right.
another portion.
The last cog of the wheel. And thank you for sharing like the whole wheel. I feel like it's really important for people to understand all of the tactics that people use to abuse and take advantage of other people. And oftentimes it may be one or two things, it may not be every single one. But if you're listening to this episode and you see any similarities in the relationship that you're currently in, really pay attention. It's so important to really pay attention to those red flags as they're occurring, right? And maybe take those rose colored glasses off so that you can see things more clearly, right? Because it can be something that develops over time and becomes worse over time. And oftentimes we will make excuses for our partner, and we should not be ever making excuses for our partner and their behavior. Behavior and actions speak louder than words. So sometimes people can be lovely and nice and caring and beautiful. And then on the flip side, with Jekyll and Hyde, they can be very abusive and horrible. So really looking at your own relationships and paying attention to all of these details that we broke down is so key.
You said something really important there, and I want to
Mm-hmm.
highlight it too, is
Yes.
that not everyone's going to experience everything on this wheel in their
Right.
relationship, right? Now, you might. And if you are, I'm very sorry that you experienced every one of these, because there are a lot of them on the wheel. But not all abusive relationships end up physically abusive. But all of them are going to be emotionally or socially abusive. And just because your abusive relationship doesn't have physical abuse does not mean you don't need as much help as somebody who is being physically abused in their relationship. So just because your relationship is like, my partner doesn't hit me, so like it's not that bad. Like, you still deserve a relationship where your partner is loving and caring to you all of the time, not just some of the time. So we need to also help society understand that just because the relationship is abusive It doesn't mean that physical abuse takes place, but we still need to help those people.
Absolutely. And just tying back sexual abuse, because this show is about sexuality and sexual health, tying back sexual abuse and relationships and say in a marriage, I just want to point out here too that when you say no, whether you're in a marriage or not, right? And the other person may want sex and you don't, and you say no is a complete sentence. And if the other person is taking advantage of you and not honoring the consent of no, right? Then that is abusive. That is sexual abuse. And you can have sexual abuse in a marriage or in a relationship where you already had sex with that person 100 times. It doesn't matter whatever happened prior to the moment. If you're saying no now, that means no. Do you want to just speak on that a little bit?
So what I want to point out in there is, speaking of marital rape, when did marital rape become illegal?
Is there a date?
Yeah. Yes.
Wow. I would say in the 80s.
No. 1993.
Wow.
The year I was born
Wow.
was when marital rape
Wow.
became
19.
illegal. So it's like when people argue all the time, people don't know how to have relationships nowadays. It's like, yeah, my grandma could have been raped by my grandpa and not had any recourse to getting out of that relationship. So yeah, people are able to have options now that they didn't have 31 years ago even.
And we don't have the time to get all the way into this, but there are a large handful of states who still do not treat marital rape in the same respect as like a stranger rape. There are conditions. It's not a class A felony in this state. It's not this in this state. Oh, it's only rape if you are legally separated. Those laws are still on the books today. So it's not something that's just cut and dry that, oh, yeah, we can just all say, got rid of that, because it's different everywhere. Look it up,
Wow.
check your facts, check your state.
Yes, and everyone should really know what those laws are in their state. I just did an episode about abortion because obviously with Roe versus Wade being overturned, every state has different laws now, and you really need to know what those laws are to protect yourself in the event that you get pregnant and it's an unwanted child, right? So this too, I find is really important to know what the laws are in your state, to know how you can be protected if, God forbid, you find yourself in a marriage and your partner is raping you. And so knowing these important things, I think, is so key for people to stay safe.
Oh, just to touch back on that piece of consent that you were talking about there, when I try and, because like I said earlier, we talk to children a lot. So when I try and talk about consent, I want people to understand that consent is not just the absence of a no, but it's the presence of a yes. So I don't have to say no for it to not be consensual. I just have to not be enthusiastically consenting with a yes, because people get scared. People sometimes feel like they can't say no. And if I feel like I can't say no, then that's not consent.
That's a good point and a great thing to bring up for child sexual abuse victims. And this show is listened to by adults. It's not for children. However, if you are a victim of childhood sexual abuse, as I am, I'm an adult now, but I remember in the past, I couldn't say no. I never felt like I could say no. So that is basically what you're describing here. And speaking of history of abuse, how does a history of abuse affect future relationships?
One of the ways, it makes it harder to trust, right? Like, you trusted somebody in this previous relationship, you were harmed by them. So moving into the next relationship, you carry that with you. So it can be really hard for someone who's experienced abuse to want to open up to somebody else again, because the last time they did, they ended up getting hurt because of it.
And even with that, just not fully understanding what a healthy relationship looks like. We spend a lot of time talking about, oh, these are the red flags, but what are the green flags? You don't even know what to look for. And if you're somebody who's been abused in the past, you probably have had some emotional abuse done to you. you've had your self-esteem knocked down, and you may not think that you are good enough for that healthy relationship. So I think that's something that is really important to touch on, because people who have been abused in the past are more likely to be abused again in the future. And that's a pattern that is really hard to break out of.
And while it is a risk factor also for someone to be abusive, having experienced abuse before, I want to point out, because I don't think we've said it yet, that the only cause of abuse in a relationship is one person's desire for power and control. Like, we may have mentioned it in the description of like domestic violence, but that's the only cause of abuse, is their desire for power and control. If they've experienced abuse before, they may be abusive because they don't want to be in a position where they don't have power now, because they've had that power taken away from them before. They don't want to experience that again. But just because someone's experienced abuse before, just because they're jealous, that doesn't mean that's why they are going to be abusive. They're abusive because they want power and control, or believe they have power and control over that person.
Power and control is the key. Absolutely. And so that brings us to our role play, right? Where we decided that I'm going to be a domestic violence victim, and I'm going to be disclosing my experience with you two. And you guys are my friends, and maybe we're out to dinner, or we're, I don't know, out somewhere, and I'm going to be telling you about that abuse. Anything else you want to say before we jump into the role play?
The only one that I would quickly point out, for those of you who might be wondering, why would somebody be allowed to get away with being abusive, especially the early abuses? And I always explain it to people, like, how many of you have had conversations with your friends if one of you needed to get rid of a body who could rely on with no questions asked? And usually, like, my audience, like, at least half people raise their hands. Now, we're not going to justify every murderer, because hopefully we all agree murder is bad. But if it's our friend, we make some justifications for them because our friend has shown us they're a good person. We wouldn't be friends with them if we didn't like hanging out with them and think they're at least a kind of okay person. Yeah, of course, my friend calls me up. Yeah, let me go grab my shovel. I'll help you out with this. An abusive person needs their victim to care about them first, to get away with some of those earlier abuses, because then they can get their victim to make some of those justifications. They're only like this when they're drinking. They've been really stressed lately. He doesn't like it when I do this, or they don't like it when I do this, so really it's my fault. They start
You're
putting
making
some of that blame.
excuses, right? You're making
Yep.
excuses for the other person. Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah. So keeping that in mind, that can be why, is because they like them. So they're going to make that justifications because they're sympathetic to that person. They
Right.
want to believe this person is good. So when they have a bad day, it's not because they're abusive, they're just struggling.
And I will point out here that even if you like somebody, or even if you love somebody, that's not always enough. And emotions can be there, and still you can have a relationship that is abusive. So we're going to jump into our role play because we only have a few more minutes. And I'm going to say action, and then I'm going to be disclosing my abuse. Okay. And here we go. Action. How are you guys tonight? I really am so glad to see you. I really want to talk to you guys about something.
Oh, it's really great to be here too. So, what is it that you wanted to talk to us about?
As I've been in a relationship with my partner for the last 6 months or so, and I don't know if this is considered abusive or not, but suddenly they are trying to isolate me from my family. They don't want my family to come over. They keep telling me if they're gonna come over, that they need to know about it ahead of time, and they are trying to not let me talk. Like when they hear me talking to like my mom, for instance, or my dad on the phone, or my brother, they are quick to try to end the conversation because they suddenly need me for something. And it's starting to become really concerning. And I just wanted to bounce that off of you, and just wondering what you think about that.
Okay. So, just to start off, like, you're looking for us to give you some insight then, right? You're looking for us to give you some help with this? This isn't something that you just want to have someone just be supportive and listen for?
I definitely would love some advice because I just find it so unusual. And I don't know why they would not want me to be in touch with my family.
Yeah, I'm sorry it's happening to you. In relationships, it can now, is he doing it? It's every time, right? It's not just,
Every single time. Yes.
yeah. So we know that sometimes people will try to make it so their partners can't see their family or talk to some of their friends. So we're glad you're able to come out tonight. But they're
He
doing that to start.
doesn't know that I'm here with you guys. So that's another thing too. Sometimes I have to, if I want to see my friends, I have to create some kind of, I don't know, story so that I can do some things that I want to do because he doesn't want to let me out of the house.
Yeah, that definitely sounds then like he's trying to cut you off from the people in your circles. And that's not okay. You shouldn't have to experience that in your relationship. And looking for the advice that you're looking for, have you talked to him at all about it? Or
Every time I bring it up, he just makes up an excuse that it has nothing to do with him trying to cut me off from my family. He needs me at that moment or whatever. And yeah, I have tried to talk to him, but it's not really sinking in.
Okay. Eve, we see these kinds of things start to happen a lot in relationships that are getting at least to a point of toxicity. And then that can really lead to relationships that become abusive. And Shawn and I we're really worried about your safety at this point of where this relationship might be headed if these are the things that are happening right now. I would suggest that we start taking a long, hard look at if this is a relationship that you really want to continue with. And if it is something that you want to keep pursuing, then maybe we could all sit down and have a conversation with them if that's something that you feel might be helpful, just to say, hey, we haven't been seeing as much of Eve lately, and we'd love to get a little bit more involved. Or if it's a relationship that you decide that you don't want to keep pursuing, keep putting this effort into, then Shawn and I can definitely help you with some resources to help you get out of that.
yeah, and we want you to know too, whatever decision you make, we will support you either way.
Thank you for saying that. I do appreciate having these wonderful friendships with both of you. And I know that I can count on you if and when I do decide to leave. And I feel like I need to think about it more because I'm not really sure. But I would love to know what resources you recommend.
You guys are living together, so it might be a problem financially if you decide to break up. You might need to contact a local shelter so that we can get you into a safe place, or maybe even just a friend or a family member that has an open room or a couch that you can go to for a while, anywhere that you're going to feel safe. And then we can get you into at least maybe some domestic violence counseling. They're free at almost every county has an agency that offers free domestic violence counseling. So I think we should maybe make some phone calls and at least get you to talk to a professional.
I love all those suggestions and I really appreciate your friendship. Did you want to say something, Shawn?
Only one I would add is if you're not quite sure if there isn't who in your county is able to help you, the National Domestic Violence Hotline or the helpline, they'll be able to connect you to that resource in your community.
Perfect. Perfect. And end scene. That was probably the most serious role play that we've ever done.
Hard to
But
make you
there
be
was
serious.
but there were some giggles at the end. But no, that was really great. And I think it's so important for people to understand that there are resources out there for them if they are experiencing any kind of domestic violence or sexual assault. And so thank you guys for being on the show today. I want to make sure that my listeners can find you. Where can we find you?
Yeah, so you can find Touchy Subjects podcast on Facebook, on Instagram, on Threads. You can find us all of our socials. TouchySubjectsPodcast.com is our website where you can find all our episodes, or you can find us on any of your favorite podcast listening apps.
Fantastic. And do you offer counseling services, or is there anything else that you want to add?
So Amanda and I do not offer counseling services. The
Okay.
agencies that we work for do. I would recommend reaching out, obviously, to the national hotline if you ever were looking for a resource in your community that you don't know about. And just looking at the role play that we did, letting somebody know who discloses to you that you're there to help and support them, regardless of what choice they make, is incredibly important, because they may not be ready to leave yet. But if they know they have your support, they know they can reach out to you when that time does come.
Great point. And I just want to make sure, I forgot. I'm just listening and I'm like not paying attention here. There's the website, touchysubjectspodcast.com. And is there a contact me page or a contact me section that people can contact you if they have any questions?
Yeah, there's a contact page, and then also you can just email us at touchysubjectspodcast@gmail.com. That goes right to us, and we can answer any questions that you got there too.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I just want to make sure that my listeners can find me on pleaseme.online. And I have a wealth of information there. My show and actually my website is up for an ASN award for Best Educator and Best Educator website. So be sure to check the website out. And there's a plethora of information on there. Check that out. And also, you can go to asnawards.com and you can vote for me for those awards, Best Educator and Best Educator website. So please make sure that you do that so that I can bring those wins home. And with that being said, I want to say goodbye to Shawn and Amanda. Thank you guys for being here today with me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
All right. And until next time, everyone. Bye. For ad-free listening, exclusive bonus episodes, Eve's library of archived webinars, and early access to new releases of Please Me, become a monthly supporter on Patreon. Simply open the Patreon app on your phone, search for Please Me, and subscribe today for premium content and more. Cheers to finding your pleasure and big clit energy.